Hello everyone. This is the first in a series of videos I've decided to do about repairing panels on A-series Citroens. Now, if you know about A-series Citroens, you know this metal is rather unique in as much as it's very thin, just 0.7 millimeters thick. I've got this Diane bonnet and they're pretty hard to come by. It's got all the dings in all the normal places. Dianes always get bumped just there, right where the bonnet catches. Got one in the front as well, which is nice. There's all sorts of dings down the side. There's a smallish rust hole, and the structure has gone a bit like how front wings on 2CVs go, and the little infill panels between the bulkhead and the wings on a 2CV, where they get a split and the wobble about. So there's lots of dings, previous bodging, bashing going on there, look. And not bad a panel. So quite a few upward dings there in the centre, and we'll see later when we get into bashing them just how thin this metal is. First things first, rust repairs and safety. Now, just think about your good looks there, and you want to be keeping them. And I use a Bolle sphere, Bolle sphere. Anyway, and good gloves. Then they have to fit properly because you need a bit of dexterousness. 2 angle grinders better than 1, saves you changing the blade all the time. 1mm cutting disc, very dangerous, most dangerous tool in the garage. And 40 grit flat wheel, both without guards. Don't try this at home. I like it for access. So first things first, get all the paint off, and gently does it, and then real caution using these tools. This is the most dangerous tool in the garage, without a doubt. Fingers well away, and cutting a really nice straight cut, top and bottom and sides, to actually cut the piece of metal out so the rust is cut out completely. Very easy to cut, but also easy to get the blade jammed and explode on you. And one of the main reasons for the face shield is face and neck completely protected by that. I've had one of these blades shatter before, and it's like shrapnel going across the garage. Pretty dangerous. Okay, that's it done. Now we're going to see exactly what we're dealing with here. This is it. This is what your classic Citroen is made out of. This is what you paid the 8 grand for. Very thin metal anyway, then it gets a bit of rust in it. Its structure's gone completely. You can push it through with your fingers. So let's make a new bit. Corner of the bonnet, quite tricky, because it has a crease line that goes around the front and then down to the sides and sweeps back. I'm going to measure out the exact piece we need with a pencil. We've got the other side to work to, which is rather useful, so that's what it should look like when we're finished, hopefully. Just going to put the diagonal line in there so we can see where it's actually supposed to go. Peel it all off, and there you have a template. This is what you need to make. You can see I've previously bodged this hole and made it bigger because I had a go at welding it and it was so thin I had to cut it back further. Now here's a piece of metal I've used a few times before. 1mm thick British steel from about 40 years ago. It's actually the front of an old storage heater that a customer gave me for nothing. Now we want to cut just outside this marking. Real care with this tool. It will have your fingers off, or if you drop it, it will run across the room and have your toes off. So just outside the line, on 3 sides. What we're going to do is we're going to shave this piece back to be exactly the right size for the hole that we've already got. And we're going to be doing that with the flat wheel, and you can take off fractions of a millimetre at a time. So we're going to put the crease in the part now, so give it, so we can try and shape it to be in something like what it should look like, roughly. The limitations on what you can actually repair on a 2CV with this sort of method is down to how well you can make a piece of metal, really. So that's the key to it all. Getting a piece that fits absolutely perfectly, and the rest all just follows on. I should add, I'm not an expert in any of this stuff. I don't do this for a living. I'm just an electrician. But I just enjoy doing stuff in my garage and making things and mending things. Very rewarding thing to do. Not to mention the financial rewards. When you do some of the stuff that I do in these series of videos, you'll see why it's £3,000 for a respray. So just trimming back there, just fractions of a millimetre at a time. We're aiming to get a piece of metal that fits perfectly into the hole to the last millimetre. It can only be about a millimetre apart, otherwise you're going to get into trying to fill holes with your welder, which is quite doable, but you're trying to do a neat job from the outset. Also, you're trying to keep heat out of the panel. So she snaps into position there, rub a finger on, have a little squint with your safety squints. There we are. Obviously you don't see on the video just how long some of this process takes, but it's probably take me about half an hour to make this piece, to get it just prized right in exactly the right places, because there's some subtle curves going on. The crease in the centre I made down, as you notice. I didn't make a sharp crease because the crease in the bonnet is not a sharp one. And when you restore a Diane, trust me, there are creases everywhere. Right, is the old kit we're going to be using. Clark Hobby Welder 0.6 wire, that's 0.6mm wire, very small, and the machine is on absolute minimum and the wire feed is on 6. Argon CO2 gas works better for me anyway at the small amounts of tiny welding that I do, and there's your wire there with 0.6mm wire. An automatic dimming mask is a must. You need both your hands free. Now I've left the sound up on this bit because listening to welding is as important as everything else. You're aiming for a real fizzle crackle sound, like you're really frying something crispy. Okay, so now I'll just start dotting it around now. As you can see, just dab, dab, dab. A hole appears here and there, but you do tiny dabs because you can't do any seam welding. This metal is so thin. The only thing to do is to put a tiny amount of heat into it in very localized small places. Here's a rather useful piece of equipment. It's just a piece of 22mm bent copper pipe. It's been bashed flat and then curved up and cleaned up to actually fit just inside there. You can see it through the gap there, and you can weld straight on top of it, and it spreads the heat very well inside the panel. And if the weld actually hits it, it just stops and goes into a blob, so you can't weld the copper to the steel. You can use it for hole filling, which I've just done there. Just filled that little hole in because it burnt back. You'll get a lot of burning back on very thin pieces of steel like this. And another go at filling a little hole that's appeared there. Like I say, this is my second attempt. The first time it really was too thin, just near the rust, and it just holed everywhere. If it's welding like this, then it's going to plan. Now, as you can see, I'm just dotting around in between places I've been before. I keep wiping off with my hand because you get like a tarnish around a weld, and it's difficult to see the brown. You get a tarnish around a weld, and it's difficult to see where you've been. So I keep wiping it off, and I keep spreading the heat around to different parts, different ends, and until you think it's completely all covered. Now, a little top tip is shine a torch up the back, and you can see if there's any little holes there left. You can see there's 2 or 3 at the top there, and where it's not quite joined. Okay, so we're just going to dot these in, and just trying not to put too much heat into the panel. It will distort if there's too much heat in it, and this had quite enough already. From what I can see, I would say that the weld itself is actually pulled downwards very slightly on the top section there, so that would be lower than it should. There's no way you'll get around with without using even the smallest skimmer filler. Or maybe you will, but if you're really good. So the last little dots just get filled in. Double check with a torch there, and there's a couple of little tiny bits that you can't see there, but I can, but from the angle I'm at. You can laugh at my awful welding technique now. All the experts, the true experts out there, will just have a good laugh at all my chicken poo welding there. And but just until absolutely every little thing's filled in. And go on, torch, come on, that's it. Until everything's that's it, no light, can't see any light through. Now, grinding, mask on, gloves on, of course. Now, there's something that people don't talk about very much. They all talk about welding, but there's as much skill, I would say, easily required in grinding as there is in welding. And it's a good reason for that, because what you're trying to do now is you're trying to very gently take off the tops of those welds that you've just made until you're absolutely at the level of the panel, but no lower. Because you just can't start grinding away at this stuff with a big heavy grit grinder. This is a 40 grit, but it's pretty worn actually. And you can see I've speeded it up, and it looks like I'm doing a lot of grinding, but I'm actually touching it very gently. And you could already see there's like a little tiny hole appearing just at the bottom there, where it's not quite taken in between two. Now, it's quite okay if you do get the odd hole, because you can either go around again and try and fill them if you can, but I'd rather not do that, because if it's a tiny little pinprick hole, then this is going to have a thin skim of filler on it anyway. What we're really looking for is, have you got the shape, and is it structurally sound? And this is like one piece of steel again now, and the shape looks good. Now I move on to the structural repair on the inner part of the wing there. You can see just how thin this is. This is on the side of the edge of the bonnet of a Diane, but it's very much the same as what you would get on the inner wing of inside the wing of a 2CV, and also the little infill panel between the bulkhead and the wing. Lots of splits and where they've been wobbled, and they're very thin and they just break. Now we're going to have a little thorough clean up there, just make sure you can't weld anything that's got paint on it or rust. Now I'm going to have a little straighten up there with a pair of pliers, but the fact is that is really thin there. I mean, I've tried to do these before with just dot in them like the other panel, and it is possible to do absolutely microscopic dots on there, but within 6 months it will break again. What this needs here is some more metal in there, and I've also tried cutting this piece, or piece like this, and infilling it, and it's just, if you've got a nice piece of panel, keep it a nice piece of panel, and instead I'm going to weld it. And it's like chasing the dragon, this, because even with the copper, because the copper is behind, you can put more heat into it, but it's going to burn back. So there we go. Just going to blob some welds in, and the trick is to chase the hole. So you're welding into the side of the hole and attaching it at the same time to what's there either side, the actual panel itself, and you're filling it in with metal. Now it's going to look, a little bit chicken shit, but I'm sorry, you're not allowed to say chicken. It might start looking a bit blobby, but the idea obviously is to put new metal in. So we're just chasing the hole out here, and there we are. You can see the copper inside there, and it doesn't stick to it. And now we're all the way to the edge. Once you've worked your way around and put all your chicken poop in there, have a little look with a torch again, so you can see there's a few little tiny holes there, and just dot them in. And now just bear in mind just how thin the metal is that you're actually working with, and take off the tops of those nibs and grind it until it's flat and looks like one piece of metal again. Now the reason why I've done this this way is because now there is more metal in there than what was there before. So it's actually quite thick, really, compared to what's around it. So it's unlikely that the wing will actually break there again. It's very unlikely. Especially considering this panel is 40 years old. So now, again, with grinding, is a real skill in it, in as much as I'm pressing very, very gently here, and I'm shaping, as you can see, rounded, like the panel. You're trying to recreate what the panel actually really is supposed to look like. So I've round it off and flat the top down. There's a tiny little hole in it, and I'm not too bothered about that because it's going to have a little tiny bit of filler on it anyway, to try and make it right again. But that is 100% metal, and you'll find it is very strong. That is as strong, or probably stronger, than the original panel was in the first place. So there we are, the panel's repaired, 100% metal. Thank you all for watching. Part 2 is going to follow, and that's the flattening all the dents out, filling and sanding, ready for painting.